Hello, I'm Tony Millward and welcome to another episode of the RockFace Podcast. My guest today is a professional musician who really knows how to capitalise on his creative talents. He's a singer-songwriter who performs in pubs, clubs, care homes, private events and festivals as a solo artist and with his swing band. He hosts open mic evenings around the East Hampshire and Surrey area. He writes a column for his local newspaper. He organises the rustic stage at the Annual Weyfest Music Festival. He volunteers at his local Oxfam music and bookshop. His streams on Spotify exceed more than 4,500 a month. I'm very grateful he found the time to have a chat with me as I welcome Vic Cracknell to the RockFace Podcast. Vic, thank you very much for agreeing to come on to the RockFace Podcast.
Oh, thank you,
It's
Tony.
good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
I know you've just come straight from a gig in a care home.
Indeed.
So I was wondering, what do you think is the importance? What do you get out of it, and what do the residents get out of it, do you think?
Well, that's a good question. What I get out of it is a very appreciative audience in a care home. Because maybe there's not too much going on for people, so the entertainer for the afternoon can be quite the focus of the day, really.
Yes.
And I tend to find if people are feeling a little bit down, then a bit of music cheers them up. And I tend to bring back some memories of yesteryear.
Yeah. Do you get many requests? Do they have do they sort of remember their favourite songs?
Well, it's interesting that occasionally a favourite song will come up, but more often than not, I kind of steer them in a direction of thinking about maybe a favourite singer or a favourite musical or something, and that normally sparks something where they'll say. Today, for example, the chap who was a big Perry Como fan.
Oh yes.
So we had a couple of his big hits.
Excellent.
This gentleman was 91 years old. And,
wow.
And then he started singing along. And
that's nice.
It's really wonderful. And he'd actually only been in the home for 4 or 5 days, so sort of settling in. So it was rather nice for him today that he could feel a bit more at home. Maybe.
Yeah, I bet he enjoyed that.
Yeah.
So you must have quite a large repertoire. Are they just all stored in your head, or do you have a massive book of songs?
Well, I do have some help with my iPad. Just mainly to remind me of the names of songs as much as anything else. But a bit of help here and there. But I actually have my songs listed by year, which really does help. And in fact, that's something I sometimes do, is I say, give me a year over the last 100 years even. And,
wow.
And then, someone will say 1957 or 1942 or something, and I can hopefully play them something from that year.
That's fantastic. And do you come out feeling sort of good, elated yourself as well?
I do, because, the mood changes, and you can tell as you're packing down your gear at the end, people are a bit happier and a bit more cheery, and they're very grateful and appreciative.
I think music cheers people up anyway, doesn't it?
Does.
If you're listening to it or if you're performing it,
I think what it does is it takes you right back to where you were when you heard that song.
Oh,
maybe
definitely.
on the radio or records or whatever it might be.
Yeah, songs are a great memory jogger, aren't they?
They really are.
Yeah, and you can sort of get the feeling and everything, and instantly remember where you were, what you were doing.
Absolutely. And on a more serious point, I mean, those that have dementia, it's absolutely proven that music is really good for people, because as the adage goes, people may not remember what they've just done 5 minutes ago, but they may remember the lyrics to a complete song.
Yes.
I've seen it so many times.
And I think it's amazing that people like Tony Bennett and Glenn Campbell, who were suffering from dementia, they could still get on the stage and remember every song word for word.
Oh, absolutely. I think that proves the point. Yeah. Big fan of both of them. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. He did his sort of farewell concert quite recently.
Yeah, he did in
Bennett?
New York, Tony Bennett. Yeah.
Yes,
It was Lady Gaga.
And he's still got the voice.
Still got the voice.
Amazing voice, yeah.
In fact, he one of his songs, I think it's called "Keep the Music Playing," or something like that. If you ever get a chance to see him perform that song, it's quite. I think when he did it, even a few years ago, he got a standing ovation for it. In fact, I saw Tony Bennett at the Royal Albert Hall about 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh, I bet that was good.
And his party piece at the end was he sung "Fly Me to the Moon" a cappella, no microphones, nothing. The band were quiet, and you could literally hear it in every corner of the Royal Albert Hall.
It was
quite amazing.
I bet that was fantastic. My mum loves Tony Bennett. Yeah, as do millions of other people. I know that you were on BBC Sussex and Surrey in December, being interviewed.
I was.
By Sylvie Blackmore.
Yes.
So I'm just hoping I don't repeat too many questions that she's asked.
Yeah.
So I was... I saw that you've been a professional musician for around 17 years. So I was wondering, what are your earliest memories of music, and what inspired you to become a musician in the first place?
Yes. I started playing the drums when I was about 15. And, I'd played music for some years, but in 2005... became a professional musician, I actually am an example of someone who came to it quite late, because I started playing the piano when I was nearly 30 and the guitar a bit later.
Right.
But I've always loved music. I grew up listening to music, and I urge anyone who's younger to at least try to have music lessons if you can.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. So list me all the instruments you can play, or to a fairly good standard.
Okay.
I mean, obviously the piano.
Well, yes, the piano, and that's probably what I play more of than anything else these days. I really love the piano. It's my favourite instrument. Drums, which I started, as I say, quite young. Guitar, a little bit of ukulele. I think maybe I'll stop there.
Have had a go at bass?
No, I've never played the bass.
Yeah, so
and singing. I mean, I'm
of course, yeah.
I mean, one of the things I do like to do is I am a great fan of jazz, particularly I do like going to a few of the jazz jams that are around.
Oh, right.
And that's where you tend to get really, really good musicians with a house band of maybe a piano, a double bass, and drums. And they're basically just playing jazz standards and that kind of thing. And I like going along and just literally singing with the house band. And
fantastic.
something
I'm not trying to flatter you, but I was listening to your albums.
Oh,
and
yes.
The swing ones in particular brings to mind Robbie Williams.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, your vocal quality. You know that album he brought out, Swing When You're Winning, I think it was called.
Oh, right, yeah.
Well, I think he brought out two, Swing Both Ways, I think it was the other one.
Yes.
And I just thought, your voice is quite similar, and I could imagine him singing some of your songs.
Well, I wish he would, and then I'd be a rich man.
You could retire.
But and I think probably, well, thank you for that. But my influence vocally is, really people like Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday.
Mel Torme?
Mel Torme, yes.
Do you like the modern versions like Harry Connick and...
Harry Connick Jr.
Michael Bublé.
And, Mickey Bubbles, as they say, Michael Bublé.
Yes.
As Claire Teal calls him, Mickey Bubbles. He gets a lot of stick, Michael Bublé.
He does, yeah. Some
but
people,
I think it's a bit unfair, really, because he is a studied singer, because you can hear elements of a lot of the great singers in his voice.
Definitely, definitely a bit of Sinatra.
Definitely.
Great arrangements as well, Michael.
Great arrangements.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
So you write a lot of songs. You got 3 albums out, and I think you've got about 17 singles or EPs you've released over the years.
Yes.
So when you write a song, what instrument do you write on?
Well, it would be the piano or guitar.
Yeah.
Songs come in different ways, and there are many songwriter podcasts out there, and which go into great detail of how people were inspired to write songs and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
For me, it's just maybe having an idea. It might be a phrase or something, or it might be a melody line. I'm very keen on melody in songs.
So am I.
And so that's why I tend to prefer the older songs from the American Songbook and those kind of eras up to the singer-songwriters of Lennon, McCartney, and Burt Bacharach, and Joni Mitchell, Paul Simon.
I love all of that.
It would come maybe from a song idea or a phrase or something or other. Would just kickstart something, and then once I've got a little something, I sort of build it from there.
Right, so there's no set formula.
Not really a set formula.
No, and when you actually get that idea, do you want to get it down as soon as possible, or do you just record it into your memo app on your phone?
I do tend to record little bits on my phone. I've got quite a few bits and pieces on my phone, and it might just be a phrase or something. An example of that would be the title track of my last album, Rediscover.
Yes.
And the song Rediscover, which starts off with a phrase, have you heard the bird song? And that was during the first lockdown during COVID. And I was out walking one day, and I literally did hear the bird song. It seemed to be louder with less traffic on the roads, and
I think so, yeah.
Fewer aeroplanes in the sky and all that kind of thing. And I just came up with that with a phrase, have you heard the bird song? And I sung it into my phone, and then I came home and I sat at the piano and basically wrote the song fairly quickly after that, actually. And it's lovely when that happens, but it doesn't happen very often.
No, it doesn't. I've got loads of ideas on my phone.
Yes.
Whether I'll actually do anything with them at any point, I don't know. I've got loads of recorded songs which I've started and haven't actually got round to finishing. So that's why I've never released an album, because I've just got a pile of unfinished songs.
Well, one idea, Tony, is to collaborate with other people, of course.
Yes.
And I do a little bit of songwriting with a couple of other guys, and that's quite a useful thing as well, to collaborate.
Yes, I was going to come on to that a bit later. So, bear that in mind. We come back to that side of it. Yeah. So, would you say you're a prolific songwriter? I mean, some people or some songwriters, they tend to write something every day, whether it turns out to be good or bad, just to keep the muscles strong. But
well, I have good intentions, but no, I wouldn't say I'm a prolific songwriter. I really feel I have to have some solid idea or something fairly worthwhile to motivate myself to pursue it, really. No, I'm not one of these ones that can just run off a song every day and whatever.
So I'm assuming from what you said to me earlier, you're not sort of very technically minded, that you don't sort of have a home recording studio.
No, I don't. No, I tend to sit down at the piano or the guitar and just play ideas into my phone or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I have been recording with a talented young producer called Joe Wright.
Oh, yes.
And he has a studio called Hillside Studios.
Right. Whereabouts is that based?
He's sort of between Alton and Petersfield.
Right.
Out that way.
Yeah.
So he is a great producer, and so we've been working together now for maybe a year or two, and most of my recent releases have been with him. And so I tend to maybe have a sort of a demo or something that I can send him, or an idea for a song, and then he's very good at coming up with ideas and direction and that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. And he produced your latest single, Easy Life.
He did.
Which has got a bit of a country feel to it.
Yes, yeah.
And the subject matter, I would say it's what we all dream of having.
Yeah, doing nothing, basically.
Yeah.
Having an easy time.
Yeah, and what's wrong with that? That's what we all strive for, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the single before that was called Search for the Higher Star, Search for a Higher Star, and that was quite a complex kind of piano-y song, and I thought, well, my next release is going to be something, it's an easy three-chorder, so it's a fairly straightforward, happy, relaxed kind of song, yeah.
It's catchy.
Yeah, I think
it's very catchy and upbeat, I would say. So, I'd just like to go on to your albums, really. Your first one was released in 2010, Nowhere to Somewhere.
That's right.
I enjoyed listening to it. There were two standout tracks for me. The first one was Moving Train, which is sort of up-tempo. It's got quite a funky beat to it. And there's another one I really like called Never Again.
Yes.
That sounds like it's quite a personal song for you.
It is quite a personal song. Yes, I remember writing that one, and it was, it's an anti-war song, really.
Yeah.
Well, it's about the First World War and the awful loss of life on all sides in that war.
Mm.
And I guess the personal connection is my grandfather, who I never met on my mother's side, Fred Ross.
Right.
And he lost his arm in the First World War. So, yes, it's really just looking at the stupidity of war, really, and
then we went and did it all over again.
How it should never happen. It should be never again.
Yes, yeah. Well, my grandfather, he was a prisoner of war in the Second World War, and he was missing for 3 years. He was building the railway between Thailand and Burma.
Ah, yes.
But there was a happy ending because he survived.
Good.
And, so going on to the next album, 2018, Voice of Love.
Yes.
Great album. My standout track for that one is Lady with Dancing Feet.
Okay.
Have you got any stories about that one? I've got a feeling you might have.
Well, yes, that one, again, was really inspired by me playing in the care homes, actually. Yeah. And I can vividly remember playing in a particular care home where there was a lady there who was singing along to a lot of the old songs that I would play. And she was quite a short lady, sat in her seat, and her feet actually didn't touch the ground. And as I was singing the songs, her feet would be going up and down in rhythm to the music. So it gave me an idea that maybe I could write an imaginary song about a lady who was a dancer in her youth.
Right.
So that's where the idea of the lady with the dancing feet came from. So it is an imaginary song, but it's about someone who was perhaps a dancer back in the day. So that's what Lady with the Dancing Feet is about. Yeah,
that's a great song. Rediscover is your latest album, came out in 2020.
Yes.
Reach One Person, which is about making a connection, probably with somebody special in your life.
Yes, indeed.
I particularly like that one. Warm September Sun. Mm-hmm. Great chorus, very catchy, reggae sort of beat to it. I was a bit intrigued because at the end of the chorus you sing something like "picking up plastic as I walk along," and I think, is there a bit of an eco message in that?
Yeah, there's an eco message.
Is that
in
what
there.
it was?
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah. That's good.
Tony, well picked up on that.
Yes.
No, it's about a particular favourite beach in the Algarve in Portugal, and the song is mainly about that.
Yeah.
But even in a lovely place like that, you still see plastic on the beaches out there, but you see it everywhere. And so my wife and I would go along the beach sometimes and pick up the plastic. And even though you look across an empty beach and it might not look like there's any rubbish on it, when you walk along and you pick up every little piece that's maybe been left around, you come away with quite a bag full of of plastic.
Yeah, that's a bit of a bone of contention with me, the plastic pollution in the seas.
Yes.
And well, the last time I managed to get abroad was my wife and I went to Paros, one of the Greek islands.
Oh yes.
And I noticed a lot of the restaurants were using plastic cups for coffees and things like that. Yes. But since then, it's become a plastic-free island.
Oh, that's good.
So they've cut out all plastics in all outlets, which I think is fantastic. Yes. So that's a step in the right direction. But getting back to point, I love the song "What Kind of Music," which is what every sort of live performer encounters. Yes. When you're setting up and somebody comes up and says, "Oh, what kind of stuff do you play, mate?"
Absolutely.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, that's
and it does.
Right.
You know, I mean, I suppose it's good that they're taking an interest, but it does get a little bit irritating, doesn't it?
I play that one a lot live, actually, when I do a solo gig.
Yeah.
I normally put that one in, and it works very well live. I tend to extend it and change the key and change the rhythms and everything, just to sort of explain that I do play different types of music.
Yes.
But it's actually, I dedicate it to anyone who's ever written a song and tried to play it in front of an audience who just is not interested or won't even give it a listen. Because, it takes a lot to write a song. And you put your heart and soul into it, and then you want to go and perform it live, and then, someone will shout, "Can you play Wonderwall?" Or, American Pie or something.
I know, I think...
And it can be very frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some pubs or some crowds in pubs, that they just want some familiar music and they want to be able to chat away.
It's understandable. If it's a Friday or Saturday night, of course, that's what people want to hear. I do enough covers gigs myself to know what that's about. But sometimes it is, it's just polite to listen to something someone.
Yes,
written.
Of course, yeah. And if you've written it yourself, it's your baby, and you want everybody to just stop talking and listen to it, don't you? Quite naturally. Another track on that album, which I really like, is the instrumental Sand Dream.
Ah, Sand Dream, yes.
And you don't do many instrumentals, do you?
I don't. In fact, I'm desperately trying to write some more instrumentals. And I know you write instrumentals, don't you, Tony?
Yes.
It's actually now become my most streamed song, Sand Dream.
I did see that. It's over 70,000 streams, isn't it?
Yeah, at this point.
Yeah.
Because I think generally instrumental music does very well on the streaming platforms.
Right.
Because people tend to have music on while they're working or relaxing or whatever, and obviously instrumental music. But no, I'd like to write some more instrumental music. It's nice, just literally having a blank canvas, literally at the piano, and coming up with something. So that's how that one came about.
Yes. Yeah, it's nice, and you don't have to worry about writing lyrics, which I find quite difficult sometimes. I sort of get the first verse and think that's fantastic, and maybe a chorus, and then I think, now what?
Of course, what you can do is write an instrumental and then come up with some lyrics later. If it's a strong enough melody, because that's how songwriters used to do it in the old days. You used to have Rodgers and Hammerstein, for example. Yeah. And Richard Rodgers would write the music, and Oscar Hammerstein would write the words. And I can't remember which came first, whether the words are written before the music. And then, of course, most famously, Elton John and Bernie Taupin, where Elton John gets the lyrics from Bernie Taupin, and he puts the music to the lyrics.
And Chris Difford and Glenn Tilbrook.
Is that the way they work as
yes,
well?
I didn't realise that until quite recently. One of them does the music and the other one does the lyrics.
Yes, yes.
It's quite a good way of doing it if you're particularly good at lyrics and not so much the music.
Yeah.
So you're working on a new album at the moment, aren't you?
I am working on a new album, yes.
How's it going?
It's going well. I have released a few tracks from it, but I've held some back that will go on the album. But yeah, it's just another collection of songs of different sorts, and some I wrote during the lockdown period. I seem to be writing a bit during those times, just a collection of different tracks. I think it's going to be called Kindness after one of the songs that I've written. So,
right.
And the theme of that song is basically about being nice to one another. So
yes, yeah. Well,
so
that's a good
that will
theme.
be the theme of the album anyway.
Well, I'll look forward to that. Any idea when it might be available?
Hopefully in the next couple of months, or certainly in 2022 anyway.
So when you're recording an album, we talked about you play a bit of drums, you play the keyboards, guitar. How many instruments do you play when you're recording an album?
Well, now I'm working with Joe Wright. He rather plays quite a lot himself.
Does he?
He's a very good guitarist.
Right.
So I tend to maybe just play the keyboard or the guitar and obviously sing on it. So that's mainly what I do on the albums. Yeah.
And that's all done in the studio, so you don't have to worry about the engineering side of it.
No, I don't.
They just stick you in front of a microphone.
Yeah.
Do you play the piano and sing at the same time, or you do them separately?
I tend to do them separately. Yeah. But no, I tend to leave that to someone like Joe, who's much more capable than me. Things like that.
And when you choose your musicians, do you just choose them from friends, or do you get recommendations, or they just happen to be people you know?
Well, to be honest, between me and Joe, we tend to cover most bases. Occasionally bring someone else in, particularly backing vocals.
Yeah.
There's a very talented singer called Julia Kay, who quite often sings backing vocals on my albums. So that really lifts some of the songs.
Excellent. Okay. Certain songwriters, they seem to have certain themes or ideas that they go back to, and mine is dreams. I tend to write a lot about dreams or mention dreams. And I noticed this isn't a criticism, because lots of songwriters do it. You tend to mention trains quite a lot, and I was wondering, I mean, you may not have even noticed, but do you think there might be any reason for that? Did you used to commute, or is it?
Right. No,
I'll give you some examples. Moving train, 6 stops.
6 stops.
Easy Life mentions getting the train and walking the 6 stops.
Well, yes, there's not any particular reason for trains. The 6 stops on the tube and the walking the 6 stops, they're connected, those two songs, because I wrote 6 stops on the tube in the summer of 2009.
Right.
And I wasn't really going to mention this, but I had some cancer at the time, and I was going up to London each day for radiotherapy.
Right.
So I was on the way to the hospital, University College Hospital up in London.
Yeah.
Each day for about 2 or 3 minutes worth of radiotherapy. And my journey each day was from Waterloo to Warren Street Tube on the Northern Line.
Yeah.
So it was 6 stops on the tube.
Oh, okay.
So I wrote that song, 6 Stops on the Tube, while I was doing those journeys. And again, it was an imaginary song about people commuting to London. So that's the 6 stops thing. And then I revisited that, I think in 2017, when I wrote Walking the 6 Stops, because I was going for my checkups there, and I decided I wouldn't take the 6 stops on the tube, but I would walk the 6 stops. So that's the
healthy option. Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting story. That was 2009, did you say?
That was 2009.
So thankfully that's all in the past now. Thank God.
Yes.
I'd like to go on to Spotify.
Okay.
Because I was having a look at your profile on Spotify, and you get about 4,500 listeners a month, which is no small amount. I mean, that is fantastic. So for a lot of people who are wondering, is it lucrative to get a lot of plays on Spotify?
No, it isn't. There is something wrong there, because there has been a campaign called #Broken Record or #Fix Streaming by a guy called Tom Gray of the band Gomez, and it's been supported by the Musicians Union and the Ivors Academy, which is a songwriting thing. Basically, to try and improve the remuneration for songwriters on streaming platforms.
Yeah.
Really, it's. I mean, I think streaming is great, and I love the fact that you can, find pretty much any song you want by any artist.
It's great for the consumer, isn't it?
Absolutely great for the consumer.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big fan, without doubt. But the actual scale of the remuneration, as I say, particularly to songwriters, is not what it should be, and tends to favour the major labels and particularly the big three. So there is some fixing to do in the system to improve the balance, shall we say. But in saying that, as I'm a fan of streaming, and I know some people who say, I'm not going to put my music on there because it's all the rip-off and all of that. But I don't believe that.
Then it won't get heard at all.
No, basically your music just won't get heard. I mean, what I love about it is the fact, there could be someone the other side of the world, in Hawaii somewhere or Japan or something, and they've heard your song and they like your music, and I'm on Twitter and places like that, and they'll send me a nice comment, and I think, well, if it wasn't for streaming, I wouldn't have that kind of connection.
Yes, didn't you get some airplay in a foreign country when you wrote a song about a particular place? Was it Monchique?
Monchique. Yeah. Well, Monchique is a song from Voice of Love, which is about a place in the Algarve, Monchique. Well, I'm not sure if it particularly has been in a particular place, but certainly that has been heard in a lot of countries. Actually, I got a chap in Australia who sent me a lovely video of him and his wife driving along, and they're driving along the highway, and they're singing to my song Monchique, and that was quite a thrill. Yes, that's probably what you're referring to.
Yeah, from all those miles away, thousands of miles away. That must be a great feeling.
Yeah, that's a great feeling.
Yeah.
And selling CDs or whatever is fine, but I don't think you'd probably get that unless it was on a streaming platform.
Yes, the whole industry has changed, hasn't it, really? When you think that, recorded music used to be the mainstream income for a musician. Yes. But now it's almost a minor part, and they're making all their money from live performances. Yeah, that's right. Well, that's the big names, that's obviously. Right.
So it just needs, there needs to be. I mean, there has been a whole government. It's gone before the Digital and Sports Committee in Parliament, the campaign, and hopefully there will be a better shake for particularly independent artists and independent songwriters, because they're not being treated fairly currently.
Yeah, and also I think musicians, if you're not sort of mainstream, or if you're of a certain age, you don't really have a platform. You don't. I mean, going back to the sort of 60s, early 70s, if you looked at the artists in the charts, there was such a wide range of music. I mean, you used to get Des O'Connor alongside Led Zeppelin in the charts and that sort of thing. That doesn't happen anymore. There are loads of talented musicians out there who don't really get heard unless you sort of stumble across them or somebody recommends them.
No, they don't. And then that leads me to, like radio airplay and things like that, because, it tends to be the ones who are pushed by the bigger labels who get the airplay. Or if an established... I think the other thing for me is if an established artist has a new album out, or a new single out, they tend to get airplay on say BBC Radio 2 or some of the national stations, regardless of the quality of maybe how this latest song or album is. Whereas there's hardworking musicians out there touring the country, who could do with the airplay, but who don't get it. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Ed Sheeran actually, because he played just about every open mic in the country before he made it, and he worked really, really hard up and down the country, playing and playing and playing till he got heard. And now, of course, he's a huge star.
And he's a great live performer as well.
Great live performer, but as I say, it's just unfortunately there's an awful lot of independent artists who are very talented. I name a few. There's a lady called Lauren Housley who I went to see recently. Who's a very, very talented performer with a band who's up for some Americana awards in the UK. Another one is Emma Stevens, who's a really, really good singer-songwriter who's completely independent and is out touring. Again, great songs. You'll hear them on the streaming platforms and whatever, and at her website. But all these sort of artists should be on the radio, but
they should be,
or in the mainstream media. But they quite often they just don't get a look in, and it's
I will look
sad.
them up, both of them. And there's one I particularly like called John Smith, singer-songwriter.
Oh yes,
John who I've followed for years,
yes.
And great guitarist.
Yes.
But you mention him to most people, and they're just saying, "Who? That's a beer, isn't it?" Sort of thing.
So and of course it's been hard with COVID because they haven't been able to gig and tour as much as they could. So it's not easy.
Yeah, it has been difficult. I'd like to move on to open mics because you host quite a few open mic events in local pubs.
Yes.
Up and down the county or counties. You've been doing that since 2005, haven't you? So is that how you sort of stepped into professional, sort of being a professional musician?
It probably was actually. I was probably hoping at the time that everyone would be bursting to hear all my solo compositions and my solo output. It wasn't quite the case when I started out then, but I did get the opportunity to take over an open mic night in Haslemere originally at a pub that's no longer there, the Crown and Cushion, and from a chap who was moving down to the coast. And so I started running open mic nights, and I've been doing them ever since, really. And I think what that has given is an opportunity to performers to perform in front of a live audience and get experience that way. So it's quite a social thing as well. People like to come out and play. You get all sorts of people coming out to play, whether they're aspiring singer-songwriters or they're just people who just like to come out and play a few cover songs or whatever.
It certainly helped me because I played in a few bands before I got married. Yeah. And then when I got married and had kids, I sort of didn't touch the guitar for years, and then I sort of got a taste for it again, and I thought I'd really love to get back into that.
Yeah.
And so I went along to some of your open mics, and it really built up my confidence. Yeah. And ultimately I got to form the duo that I'm in now. Oh,
well, that's good.
Called T&H, by the way, just to give it a plug.
Okay.
And you had Mike Dawes a few times, didn't you? Who's gone on to be quite successful. Well, very successful. And a brilliant guitarist.
Yeah. Mike came to some of the early nights that I put on, and he's gone on to great things. I think he's won quite a few awards, I think, now for his guitar playing, and he also plays with Justin Hayward. The Moody Blues.
Another good songwriter.
Yeah,
obviously you play a lot of pub gigs.
Yeah.
Do you find their attitude towards live music has changed since the pandemic? I mean, do you think they're struggling with paying for live music because their income has obviously gone down? Have you found that's had any effect at all?
Well, I mean, it obviously has had an effect. I think there's just been a nervousness about putting too much live music back on, but I think it will come back. I'm really optimistic that it will come back. Hopefully to how it was. Yeah. I mean, certainly, I think the pubs who really support live music, as ever, you just need to get people out to support it. And that's always been the difficult thing. But just it's a bit of a cliche, but support live music.
Definitely. Obviously, you're very active on the local music scene, either playing live music or hosting open mic nights. So over the years, you've met quite a few famous people, haven't you? So namely Paul McCartney. Do you have any sort of memories of what happened there? How did you come to meet him for a start?
Yes, well, that was a complete surprise. That was. I happened to be in London about 20 years ago, I think it was, and to cut a long story short, I was at Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club. The legendary Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club, and I was watching one of the acts playing there. And if you've ever been to Ronnie Scott's club, it's quite dark in there, and they have sort of table lamps on the tables. And I was sat quite near the sort of back of the room, and there was a corner seat right at the back of the club. And I was watching the band, and I was very conscious of someone coming in with maybe a couple of security people, and sat in the back seat, corner seat of the club. I looked up and I could not believe my eyes. I thought, that's Paul McCartney.
Did he have an entourage with him, or
he didn't have an entourage at all with him. He had his former wife Heather Mills with him. So he was sat in the corner seat there, and I remember I was sat there and I thought, my goodness, legendary Paul McCartney is sat there. Am I going to let this moment pass and regret it the rest of my life that I didn't at least go and try and say hello to him or not? And to cut a long story short, I steeled myself and I went and sat next to him in the corner seat, thinking I'd be slung out of the club. And I said, hello, Mr. McCartney. Can I just say hello? I've loved your music forever and ever. Blah-de-blah-de-blah, and he was very gracious enough to give me his time, and I must have spent about 10 or 15 minutes having a chat with him.
That must have been fantastic.
It really was. He was very kind, and we had a little chat about music, and anyway, I obviously slightly overstaying my welcome, because he said something like, well, it's very nice to meet you. Shall we get back to the music now? So that was my time to leave.
Well, it could have been worse.
I said, no, that's right.
I love Paul McCartney. You mentioned melody. He's got such an amazing sense of melody.
Incredible sense of melody.
There's the sort of John Lennon, Paul McCartney school of thought. I've always preferred, I love John Lennon, but I've always preferred Paul McCartney. He just comes up with so many melodies.
Oh, so many melodies, yeah.
And he's so prolific as well.
Yeah,
absolutely amazing musician.
So that was an absolute thrill. I did actually meet one other Beatle very briefly, and that was Ringo.
Right.
And I was at a Ray Charles concert in 1982, I think it was, at the Royal Festival Hall. and it was Ray Charles and his orchestra, and most of the audience was made up of well-known people because so many people had come out to see him. And Ringo was walking out with his wife, Barbara Bach, and I remember going up to him and saying, "Can I have an autograph, please?" And he said to me, "Have you got a pen?" And I said, "I haven't got a pen." He says, "Well, you can't have an autograph." So that was that. But at least I got to see him anyway.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, it's fair enough.
At least you know he would have given you an autograph.
Yeah,
And Charlie Watts?
Charlie Watts, oh yes.
Sadly no longer with us.
Yeah, that was a real thrill. He came to play a little gig at Farnham Maltings, which is in Farnham where I live. And
he had a jazz band, didn't he?
Yeah, well, what it was, wonderful piano player called Ben Waters. Someone maybe you should get for this podcast, Tony, Ben Waters. He is one of the best boogie-woogie piano players in the country, Ben. And he was doing a tour of boogie-woogie piano with a chap called Axel Swingenberger, who is one of Germany's top boogie-woogie piano players.
You did well to remember that name and pronounce it.
And when you get two piano players playing off one another, it's quite a thrill. And the connection was that they'd got Dave Green as the bass player, double bass player, and Dave Green is a childhood friend of Charlie Watts. They went to school together. And so when Dave Green was doing the gig, he said to Charlie, "Would you like to play on," the Stones weren't touring at the time. And he said, "Yeah, sure." So they did a little tour with this boogie-woogie piano setup. So Charlie Watts was the drummer. As it turned out, Dave Green actually wasn't on the gig that I saw it because he couldn't make that particular night. But anyway, I got to meet Charlie backstage and had a chat with him, and it was most delightful. Funnily enough, the message I got from him was, I said how much I liked jazz, because I know he was a big jazz fan.
Yeah.
And he said it's really, really important to support jazz. He said we mustn't let it sort of fade out, and we must go and support jazz gigs. So that's the one particular message that I remember from Charlie Watts when I saw him.
He always seemed a very sort of gentle, gracious kind of character.
Yeah, definitely. And he was very polite and very humble. And I got one picture taken with him, which was lovely. And a fantastic drummer. I mean, for me, the Rolling Stones, would never be and are not the same without Charlie Watts, because the style that he gave the drumming, being a jazz drummer going into sort of an R&B blues band.
It just
made all the
put his own sort of swing on it, didn't he?
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's like The Who, isn't it? And Keith Moon.
Yeah.
They could never replace Keith Moon really, because he was just a unique drummer with a unique style.
Absolutely.
Now, I know you met Robert Plant. I'm a massive fan of Robert Plant, and I know people who have met him and said he's such a nice person as well, down to earth. Well,
I met him only very briefly, again because he was in the audience. Sounds like I'm stalking these people, but I'm not. He was at a gig at Portsmouth Guildhall, and it was Chuck Berry and Jerry Lee Lewis. So it was I just happened to see him and had a brief word, but we didn't speak for very long at all. But it was a great gig because Chuck Berry did the first half, and then Jerry Lee Lewis did the second half. And,
what a combination.
It was quite a combination, and Chuck Berry was interesting because he never used to tour with his own musicians, so he had some British musicians that he was playing with who he'd probably never played with before. And so that worked in that way. And then the oddest thing of all, Jerry Lee Lewis, who I'm a huge fan of, my most memorable vision of him was when he walked on the stage with a pipe. The idea of him playing rock and roll with a pipe didn't quite get it for me. He only played for about half an hour.
I can't imagine him smoking a pipe. That's not his image at all, is it?
No.
Yeah.
But it was a great gig, and yes, Robert Plant just happened to be there because I know he's a huge fan of.
He's still going strong.
Those people, yeah.
With an album out with Alison Krauss.
Alison Krauss, yes, indeed.
Second collaboration with her.
Yeah.
Really great album.
Yeah.
Now, somebody else I really admire as well as a songwriter is Gilbert O'Sullivan.
Ah, yes. Well, I went to see him a couple of years ago, I always enjoyed Gilbert O'Sullivan's music, again, because I think perhaps he's a melody guy, and I think he was very influenced by some of the early great songwriters like Cole Porter and the Gershwins and Irving Berlin and Harry Warren and people like that. So he was great when I went to see him play, and he still has a fascinating way of writing songs where he writes the melody, the instrumental, completely, and then writes the words completely afterwards. And that is his way he writes every single song that he writes.
That is interesting. I'm not sure I could do that because I've tried taking out the melody from some of my instrumentals and playing them and trying to come up with a lyric or an alternative melody. It just doesn't work. So that's now Peter Green.
Yes, Peter Green.
Obviously founder of Fleetwood Mac.
Yes. And
brilliant blues guitarist as well. I think he was with John Mayall's Blues Breakers for a while.
He was.
Didn't he replace Eric Clapton?
I think he did.
So what do you remember about that meeting?
Well, I saw him, I went to see him play at the Princess Hall in Aldershot, and I think it was a time when he'd been cajoled to come back out playing again. I think it was the Splinter Group, and they basically encouraged him to come out playing again because he was quite a recluse for quite a long while. Yeah. But he had a brief period when he came back to play. And I remember that gig, he played really, really well. He played a lot of his well-known songs like Albatross and some of the others.
Need Your Love So Bad?
Need Your Love So Bad.
Love that song.
I'm pretty sure he played that night. I just got to meet him afterwards. He had a very brief chat with him, but it was really nice to meet Peter Green.
He made a comeback album. He called the band Kathmandu, and the album was called A Case of the Blues.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And it was it had Ray Dorset, ex-Mungo Jerry.
Oh, yes.
On there. Vince Crane from Atomic Rooster.
Yeah.
On the keyboards, I think.
Uh-huh.
And Len Surtees on bass, who hopefully I'm going to be speaking to later in the week.
Yeah.
Didn't really do very much, unfortunately.
No. I think in his heyday, I mean, I know B.B. King, of all people, named him as one of the best guitarists in the world. He was a huge Peter Green fan. So coming from someone like B.B. King,
he was in his heyday. Very good. Now, I've got a list of other people you've met. So if I just mention them.
Okay.
And maybe you've got some stories about them, maybe you haven't. Bob Harris, the legendary Bob Harris.
Oh, yes, the legendary Bob Harris. I met Bob when he was doing a tour for his autobiography, and Whispering Bob. Yes, so I got to meet Bob. He really is a legendary, particularly radio DJ, but also, of course, from the whistle test and everything like that. I think the great thing about Bob is he's so supportive of up-and-coming talent and artists and songwriters in whatever genre, particularly country these days, but he's given a platform to so many different people.
I used to love him on the old grey whistle test. I mean, that was my sort of teenage years.
Me too.
When, I can't remember what day it was on now, but it was on quite late, wasn't it? Everyone else had gone to bed. It was like my special time watching these amazing acts that I've never heard of before.
Yes.
People like, I remember seeing Meatloaf. Well, I didn't see them because they played one of their sort of old film clips that they used to have on the old rehearsal test, because they didn't have videos or anything like that.
Yes.
But I'd heard Meatloaf's voice and I thought, wow, I've never heard anything like that in my life. It was amazing.
Well,
So
it's important to have people like Bob Harris around who will introduce people to new music. You need these people who can guide you to looking at something new. And again, not just leaving it to the record companies to push their latest act.
Yes. Albert Lee, fantastic, brilliant guitarist. Yeah. I mean, that so fast.
Yes.
And that sort of country style. Yes. Well, Country Boy was one of his big hits, wasn't it? Probably his most sort of famous one. Yeah.
It was. Well, I was very lucky. I was actually the support act at a local gig that Albert did. And again, I had a nice chat with him. And I think most people will say he's one of the nicest guys you can meet, Albert Lee.
He comes across that way. Yeah, I've seen him really, interviewed.
Yeah. And he was a big part of the Everly Brothers reunion as well, when the Everly Brothers got back together in 1983, I think it was, the Royal Albert Hall concert. Albert was in charge of the band. And at that point, Don and Phil Everly weren't even really talking together. So
I had a Simon and Garfunkel really moment.
Yeah.
I've got Claire Teal.
Claire Teal, I went to see her. I've seen her live a couple of times now, and Claire Teal is not only a wonderful jazz singer, she's one of the few people who has incredible knowledge of musicians from the 1930s, 40s, 50s. On her radio show, she's now on Jazz FM with her own show. She will talk about a record and she will tell you who the trumpet player was, the saxophone player, whether it was tenor or alto, who's on trombone, who the drummer was.
Encyclopedia of jazz.
Encyclopedia of jazz. Yeah. And she's a really, really nice person. And as I say, as well as being a fantastic jazz singer, she's a great radio DJ as well.
Yeah, and somebody else who went on to become a radio presenter, Jamie Collum.
Indeed, yeah. Oh, Jamie Collum, yes. Oh, yes, I saw him at the Virgin Festival early on in his career when he was just starting to break out. I think he got discovered mainly on the Michael Parkinson show on the BBC, and he went out to play. I got to meet him briefly.
Fantastic. Yeah, and Joe Brown, I mean, I think he's about to do or recently did his farewell concert, which is a shame. But, I mean, he was there in the forefront of the sort of rock and roll era, wasn't he?
Absolutely, from the kind of early, mid-60s.
Yeah, and again, a brilliant guitarist.
And yeah, I mean, I went to see him live, and a fantastic musician. I mean, effortlessly going from guitar to ukulele to mandolin to any stringed instrument, it seemed he could play. And for me, actually, his performance was the highlight of the concert for George, Harrison that Eric Clapton put together.
Yeah, fantastic concert.
Because he closed the concert with just his very simple rendition on the ukulele of "I'll See You in My Dreams," which is an old jazz standard. And the simplicity of that song, he knew that George loved the ukulele as well. And Joe Brown playing that song has become a bit of a signature tune for him, I think, now.
If I could just move on to some of your other activities, because you write a weekly piece for the Farnham Herald.
I do,
music column.
I write a music column. Yes, it goes in various editions: Farnham, Alton, Haslemere, Petersfield.
How did that come about? Did you approach them, or did they approach you?
Well, no, they approached me.
Yeah.
So they just kindly asked if I'd like to write a column. And so I do it really just to try and help the local music scene and try and promote live music around the place.
And speaking of which, you got an award, didn't you, in 2020, Services to Farnham, presented by the Mayor of Farnham.
Yeah, that was very nice.
Yeah,
yes,
must have been a proud moment.
That was a proud moment, yes.
Yeah, that must have been fantastic. And I think you're in the offing for another award with the GSMC, which stands for Graham Still Music Awards.
Well, I've been nominated for one.
Been nominated.
Yeah.
The results are due on the 20th of January, so you've got a few days to wait yet. But I've voted for you, by the way, so
that's very
I
good.
did my bit.
You did.
And also, you volunteer in the Oxfam Music and Bookshop.
Yeah, I do. Yes. It's mainly if some musical instruments come in that they want to sell, and sheet music and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's sheet music these days is not as popular as it was because most things are available on the internet. But it's quite nice, particularly for people who might be taking up an instrument. It could be the guitar, saxophone, the trumpet, piano, whatever it might be. And there's always a good selection of sheet music books. Might help people.
I saw you got a few vinyl albums in there as well from some of the photographs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, there's a good selection of vinyl in there. You'll have to pop in. It's a good shop.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a collection.
It's one of those shops, you go in there, you think you don't want anything, you come out with something.
I'll definitely have to pay you a visit. Yeah. Another thing that you're involved in on a yearly basis and have been for some time is the Weyfest event.
Yes, indeed.
Near Frensham in Surrey.
Yeah, it takes place at the, I think they call it now the Rural
Life Centre?
Used to be called the Rural Life Centre, it's now called the Rural Life Living Museum.
Ah, okay.
There we are. But it's a great venue for the festival. That's been going for well over 10 years now, about 12 years, I think.
Do you know, I've never been.
You've got to go, Tony.
And it's literally 10 minutes drive from here.
Seriously, it's a great festival, Tony. You're missing something. You must go to Weyfest. It's a very family-friendly festival, and they've had many, many big acts playing there over the years. But I host the rustic stage with a guy called Chris Ross, and it tends to be the more acoustic-orientated acts. But we've had a number of talented people play over the years, and some have gone on to other things. One year I did get, I was hoping to get Ward Thomas, who are very popular now. Yeah. And when I told the Weyfest organisers that I got them for a rustic stage, they immediately bumped them onto a bigger stage. So that was good to get people like them on there. But no, Weyfest is 4 stages there, and it probably is the biggest festival in Surrey now.
Must be. It always creeps up on me. I just suddenly see, oh, it's next weekend. Oh, I'm doing something. I'm working or something. It's too late.
It's in August every year. Yeah.
In August.
Yeah.
Right. I'll make a note of that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Vic, thank you so much for doing this. It's been really interesting talking to you. Good to catch up with you again.
Yeah.
So all that remains to say is, Vic Cracknell, thank you very much for appearing on the RockFace podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I really enjoyed that chat with Vic about his performing, songwriting and his encounters with some of his music heroes. That chat went on for quite a while after we finished recording, and he gave me quite a few useful tips and suggestions for future guests. So I'm really grateful that he managed to fit me into his busy schedule. So many thanks to Vic, and many thanks to you for listening. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please rate and review it, and come back again for another edition of the RockFace Podcast.